interestingly enough, there was a solar eclipse in Mesoamerica that rose in eclipse. Here's the problem with the Star of Bethlehem. Nobody frickin' saw it.
Yeah.
Aaron didn't see it. His guys didn't see it. The only ones that knew about it or explained it, thought of it, even knew anything about it were the Magi, right?
That came from far in the east.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the cool thing about this solar eclipse that occurred at that date is it traveled and it set at sunset in Persia, where the Magi were.
Whoa, really?
Yeah.
I'm spending money like I just got paid. $100 bills, tell them keep the change. Come on.
It didn't occur in Israel or in China where they actually keep records of these things. So
Pop a bottle, about to make it rain. Let me give you something now to celebrate. Come on.
you have what's called a coronal mass ejection or emission.
And if you're wondering why I move the way I do, I just feel so good.
That king, born of fire, the She-Cock in Maya, Aaron, who is the king that Mormon battled. In Hebrew, Aaron means conceived or born in flame. So it's the same guy.
Whoa, that is crazy.
The following is an episode of Ward Radio and does not represent the thoughts or the opinions of KHTS, its owners, or any of its affiliates, nor does it represent the official opinion of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Ward Radio. I'm your host, Cardinellis, and today I'm joined in the studio by none other than Ed Thomas, bodyguard, as well as Jerry Grover, prolific author and geologist, who has brought to our attention some really interesting stuff in his new book, Calendars and Chronology of the Book of Mormon, where he debunks a bunch of anti-Mormon attacks against the geology, the archaeology of the church, that there was no night of darkness before Christ came in 3rd Nephi, and a bunch of other stuff. I can't even do your book justice in the intro, Jerry, so why don't you just jump right in, tell us who you are, tell us what your book talks about, and show us how there actually was a night of signs and wonders, and explain all these really cool pictures that you put in the book. I'm very grateful. Usually these apologetic books don't have cool, awesome graphs and stuff like that we can just look at, and us visual guys, we really appreciate that. The troglodytes, we appreciate it when you speak in our 3rd grade language, which is pictures. So anyway, Jerry, who are you? What's your book? What do you prove? Give us the whole 9 yards, Jerry Grover, go.
Yeah, I put those pictures in with you in mind. I watch your podcast quite often, so I know the kind of level I'm dealing with here.
Yeah,
so.
Flattery will get you everywhere, baby. Flattery will get you everywhere. Wait, so that was a diss, not a compliment. Oh, savage, man.
Well,
savage.
Just like many things could be interpreted either way. So.
Okay, all right. So tell us about your book, dog, before I kick you out of my studio.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the book talks about explains the night of brightness that is in the Book of Mormon scientifically, and also explains the signs and wonders that are mentioned along with that prior to Christ, just before Christ was born.
Now, when you say it explains the Book of Mormon scientifically, like what aspect? The archaeological proof that Nephi was in Zarahemla in this spot north of Serpent Mound, or?
That's my next book. I haven't got to that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what, when you say it scientifically explains Book of Mormon, what do you mean?
Well, what I do, if you look at all my work, because I'm a scientist, I'm actually a licensed professional engineer, licensed geologist. I have a unique look at the Book of Mormon. So I look at scientifically how these things happen. I also look at linguistics of the Book of Mormon. So that's kind of my bailiwick. I know you don't like that word.
No, that's a great word. I'm going to use it today. You know what I'm saying?
I know in a prior podcast, you guys choked on that one when Don Bradley brought it up.
I don't remember that. I do not remember that. Chemo brain is kicking in, so let's go.
So I'm I'm a fanboy here. So, but basically, so this one is looking at what could actually explain this night of brightness scientifically without relying on some miracle, right? And then also, what are the signs and wonders that they're talking about that also accompanied it? So, So that's my approach. It's kind of explaining it scientifically. It's not really a faith promoting kind of thing. It's just I explain it all kind of in the cold, cruel world of science.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's the cold, cruel world of science that explains this night of darkness? Because I've actually read a lot of anti-Mormon literature that says like, oh, the Book of Mormon can't be true because there is zero archaeological evidence that there was a night with no darkness that preceded the coming of Jesus Christ in the Americas, or at least his birth, as it's told in 3rd Nephi.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Well, I don't show it archaeologically, but I show it scientifically how it could have happened in this particular case. So,
okay, hit it, brother.
Yeah, so you basically have to look at the Book of Mormon and what it says. It says you had this night of brightness. It didn't occur in Israel or in China where they actually keep records of these things. So it had to be something that was more of a local event.
Okay.
You also, it talks about it being heard. The Signs and Wonders, they heard something. Mm-hmm. And then you also have to put it in context of the duration of it, right? It only lasted like a day.
Okay.
Or one night, right? It could have gone further.
Kind of like the Krakatoa explosion. It's that thing that happened that the world heard like 3 times over because it traveled around the world like 3 times. And
yeah.
We know there was that event that happened in that specific locality.
Right.
So you're saying something similar might have happened in wherever you think the Book of Mormon happened that would explain the night of no darkness.
Right. And so essentially you have these parameters that the scriptures give you, and then you, as a scientist, you take that and say, okay, it's an ancient text, so they're trying to, they don't really know the science, right? They're just trying to explain it in their vocabulary. So
yeah.
So basically I looked at it and said, actually, and in the book I go through, I explain supernovas, all these things that don't work, but the one that does is you have what's called a coronal mass ejection or emission that can occur. The sun shifts, it's about every 11 years it shifts its magnetic field, shifts from one up, just reverses.
Okay.
And while it's shifting, it has all these crazy magnetic weird things that occur that are, and what happens is, not always, but sometimes periodically, it will throw off a huge amount of solar plasma. It's called a coronal mass emission, a CME. That, and it goes in any direction, but when it hits the Earth, and this happened in 1859, it's called the Carrington event.
Oh, okay.
When it hits the Earth, and you can probably bring up one of my illustrations here.
Did you email that to me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pull it up. Keep talking.
It's 25.
Okay, awesome.
And essentially what happens is it hits the magnetosphere and actually warps the magnetosphere. It causes huge electrical storms. Like the telegraph operators in 1859 got electrocuted and their telegraph unit started on fire.
Whoa, okay.
And we've had a small one that was in Canada that knocked out the power grid a few years back. So, so they occur. But what happens is when it hits the magnetosphere and basically warps the magnetosphere, it supercharges the northern lights and the southern lights, the aurora borealis, and it shifts them to the south.
Okay.
And so this 1859 event, what you had was reported periods of brightness. Gold miners got up to mine. Birds were up. It looked like it was kind of day, right?
Okay.
And so that, and it was of short duration, like 12 hours, 14 hours. That's the other thing.
Really?
And when it occurred in 1859, it only occurred it didn't occur on the other side of the world. It only occurred in our hemisphere. So that matches what we would expect.
Is this similar to that event that happened in the early 1900s where like an electromagnetic, some kind of discharge from the sun created like an aurora borealis magnetosphere event so intense that even as far south as Cuba, I believe the Cuban poet Jose Marti wrote about it.
Well, I think that's probably this event that he's talking about. I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't think there was one. So they observed, and they had.
There was people seeing aurora borealis as far as south as Cuba.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this in the 1859 event, they saw it even into Colombia, right? Mm-hmm. So
really,
yeah. So you had it in Mesoamerica, you had it in Mexico, and it created not only they had domes, these weird dome. The Northern Lights, it it basically gave all these weird shapes.
Okay.
And super, of course, the Northern Lights looked like snakes, so they were really these high red, green type snakes in the sky, And so,
okay.
Right.
Is that what this little picture on the back of your book was? Where I noticed that you said that like the
Yep.
Aurora Borealis looks kind of like the snake?
Yeah. And actually, we'll talk about that in another podcast, but the glyph form for the Night of Brightness in the characters document is next to it, and it looks just like it. So,
interesting.
right.
Yeah, so you're saying that this is actually the glyph form from where?
From the characters document, the Reformed Egyptian. So,
Oh, yeah, we did a podcast on that because you're the guy that actually translated the characters document. Dude, you are so cool, man.
well, it's hard.
That's funny. All right, so you literally think that the night of the signs and wonders of the coming of Christ and so on and so forth was, just repeat what it's called again?
A CME, coronal mass ejection or coronal mass emission.
Okay, and you are saying there was. I'm going over this to make sure that I'm catching up with you, my man. So you think it was a CME, a coronal mass ejection, that would have happened 2,000 years ago when Christ came to the Americas, but that there is
his birth. This would be his birth.
His birth before he came to the Americas. I apologize. But yes, so that marked his birth. Famously, it's what preserved the Lamanites from killing the Nephites, because it was indeed the sign and wonder that came at his coming when he was born, as told in the Book of Mormon. So you're saying the CME could explain why it wouldn't have been seen in Israel, but would have been seen in the New World in Book of Mormon territory, and that there's been many of these even into modernity that have been registered and documented and recorded. That kind of established not a precedent, but a postident. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they don't occur the big ones don't occur very often. They think there was one like in 600 AD, maybe, I did try to go back. The one in the 600 AD, it did leave a carbon-14, it modified the carbon-14 rate slightly. If you're familiar with radiometric dating.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
Rock on.
Yeah. If you're on that app, I don't know, but
okay. I don't know there was an app, but okay.
It's one of the dating apps that not many people go on.
Oh, okay. Cool. Scientific dating app.
That's very funny.
Where you actually have to know what, you have to be able to say what, not Robert's Rules of Order, that's for politicians, but you have to be able to say what the Fibonacci sequence is and in order to get on, or I probably mispronounced that.
That's right.
But,
Fibonacci sequence.
yeah. Okay. So anyway, keep going.
And anyway, so essentially you have, I did go back and try to find, and so I looked at the radiometric, they actually develop a radiometric curve that they use for the carbon-14 dating, and it's based on dendrochronology, which is looking at tree rings. And so that's how they determine if there is a slight fluctuation. They look at, was there something happened weird in one of the years that maybe would indicate one of these events. Okay. Unfortunately, that date, they only were, they averaged, it was, I don't know, some trees out of Japan or something was what they used for developing the curve, and it was like an average. So I didn't have there was not a particular measurement in that year in the data set. So I couldn't see if I could show. You don't necessarily expect it necessarily because this Carrington event didn't exhibit that. So
okay.
So I did try to go back and see if I could find evidence of a coronal mass emission around the birth date of Christ, right?
Okay.
So and then I looked at some ice cores too. There's other chemicals, beryllium, and that. Again, nobody cares about that.
Okay, no,
the weeds
cool.
here, but
this
I'm just
cool.
saying. But,
yeah,
and I had the same issue that I could not. The ice cores did not differentiate that particular time period where I had measurement. So I couldn't really show it scientifically that it occurred. But
at the time of Christ.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But there's ancillary to that, and let me go into it. Is the other thing I was trying to figure out in this book, right? It's a chronology book, so I was trying to see, could I figure out a more exact birth date of Christ, right?
Okay.
So in the Book of Mormon, they pick this day to kill the people. In Mesoamerica, they just don't kill people. If they pick a day, it's a ritual, right? Okay. It's like a Benedict, they waited 2 days to kill him, or so they're doing it on a particular day for a particular reason. They were obviously from the counter religion, right? So it's looking at the pagan or religion around them. They were obviously the minority. How could they be, be put to death if they outnumbered the guys putting them to death, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
So they were a very small group. So I said, okay. And then you have this curious verse just before that where it says there's this great uproar throughout the land. Doesn't?
Interesting.
Uproar's not mentioned anywhere else in the Book of Mormon. And it's like, what is going on here? Well, in Mesoamerica, at a solar eclipse, they could predict the dates of solar eclipses because they do come in cycles.
Okay.
They don't always, they couldn't tell if the solar eclipse was going to be visible over Mesoamerica, but they could tell somewhere on the earth there was going to be one. So, and in Mesoamerica, before a solar eclipse or during a solar eclipse, number one, they go out and make this huge noise, screaming, yelling, and
oh, really?
yeah, and pound drums and make their dogs
is that
howl.
like an ancient practice or a modern one?
Well, as far as we know, it was observed modernly, right? Meaning we don't have documentation. Unfortunately, all the books were burned.
Yeah, the Mayan codices were destroyed and they were burned in a fire by many of the conquistadors. Yes,
but they have found some events that look like they correspond with that, where a king is like. It's matching solar eclipse day. So
okay.
So it's known that they tracked it. And the other thing the Aztecs did was they would sacrifice people.
Yeah.
And they also preferred light-complected or albino people to sacrifice, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and so
wait, there was an Aztec preference for albino people because of a preference, or because they viewed them as
it's light complected or albino people. That's just what they observed when the Spanish came, right?
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know. There's a great explanation for why they chose those. Which, again, if you may look at, Nephites would probably, qualify there too. So so you're looking at a specific event, and the reason they did it was because they believed that a serpent, because there's the level of the sky where the sun is also in their belief system. There's all these serpents at that level, and they believe the snake eats the sun. That's why. That's explaining the eclipse, right?
Is that kind of why in Serpent Mound the mouth is facing the sun, and a lot of people talked about the serpent eating the sun? I'm not trying to say that Serpent Mound is freaking Nephite or something like that, but I'm just saying
I don't know
many people.
I don't know if anyone's made that connection on the Serpent Mound.
Look, I watched Graham Hancock's America before. All right. Actually, I don't even know what it was called. I can't remember. But I know in his book that's one of the things that I'm big into archaeoastronomy. I love, there's the sun disk that you can find in the Four Corners area. There's obviously the archaeoastronomy of Stonehenge.
Well, you like my book then.
And so on and so forth. Yes, I'm totally into this kind of thing. And I know some people have surmised that if the Serpent Mound were built, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago or whatever, that its mouth would be facing the sun as it rises during, I can't remember if it was the winter solstice or the autumnal equinox or whatever. But they said that the direction that the mouth is facing is consistent with equinoxes at the time that they believe that it was built, and therefore they saw a connection to lore that exists in other cultures further south, saying that the serpent eats the sun. So
and so essentially I said, okay, I kind of know basically the rough time frame when Christ was born, prior to 4 BC.
Okay, yeah.
And Herod, had died, but so a couple years before that, maybe 6 BC. Anyway, I looked, and interestingly enough, there was a solar eclipse in Mesoamerica that rose in eclipse. That's
really,
yeah, and it was partial eclipse, and that was April 16th, 6 BC. Okay,
really,
yeah. So I surmise that it'd be interesting to them. It would have been a catastrophe because they have these snakes appearing in the sky. Night of brightness with all these red and green and
the
snakes.
Aurora Borealis,
down there with all these
crazy
snakes
in the sky. Yeah, okay.
And they believe snakes eat the sun, and then the sun comes up half eat. Okay. That's why they freaked out. For the pagan religion, it was catastrophe.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and this all would have coincided on the same day.
Yeah. I mean, you have the night of brightness, the snakes, and then the sun rises. Again, another sign and wonder. And so it's interesting because then I said, okay, I wonder in the old world what people have come up with. And there's a guy, Michael Molnar, an astronomer, and he basically said, here's the problem with the Star of Bethlehem. Nobody frickin' saw it.
Yeah.
Herod didn't see it. His guys didn't see it. The only ones that knew about it or explained it, thought of it, even knew anything about it were the Magi, right?
That came from far in the east.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the cool thing about this solar eclipse that occurred at that date is it traveled and it set at sunset in Persia, where the Magi were.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. And this guy actually, he didn't even know about the solar eclipse, but he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the astrological techniques that the Magi would have used to project divine, some strange birth. And he said, I used those techniques, identified one day where it's like 1,000,000 to 1, and it shows divine king in multiple ways. Basically, it's Jupiter as a star, the moon passed in front of it, and essentially came up with the date of April 16th, 6 BC, the exact same day I came up with.
Whoa! Wait. So you're saying an astrologer or an astronomist that was trying to track when that solar eclipse that rose in eclipse.
No, he didn't know anything about the eclipse. He just took the wise men had these. They were astrologers, not using astronomy. These guys, they were using their
their tools, their charts, their graphs. They were the awesome dudes.
Their weird stuff. And it was in the
they were the
mid-heaven.
Griffith Observatory of 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
yes.
So they observed, but they had all these techniques, and a lot of times it was after the fact because some emperor wanted to prove he was divine, right? And so they would look at his birth date and, that would add to his bona fides as this great, powerful, divine guy. Yeah, so I'm just saying he came up with the same day. And so I basically think, and then the funky thing too is I said, okay, because you have software where you can look back. I use Stellarium. So you can actually go back to a particular date and a particular location. You can generate what the sky looked like. There is the prophecy of Christ in Numbers is that a scepter would arise over Israel. And if you take that date, all the sun, the moon, because there's eclipse, and all the planets are in an exact straight line.
Whoa.
Just like a scepter. So it's kind of interesting. So I do think I can show pretty accurately. And then if you actually use that date in the Book of Mormon chronology, and there's specific year lengths that you got to use, it will have Lehi leaving just basically 2 weeks before the siege started.
Really?
And you also have, I can show that the final battle, and I can get the date for the final battle, exactly when that occurred. And there are some Mesoamerican correlations there with some known history, namely that there was a king called Born of Fire who came into Tikal and knocked off Jaguarapah, and went to other kingdoms. That was the year before the final battle. So because we have all these numerous Lamanites all of a sudden they were just overrun, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have more kids. They obviously were consolidating power.
Wow.
Well, and the funky thing is the name of that king, Born of Fire, that Sheikok in the Maya, Aaron, who is the king that Mormon battled. In Hebrew, Aaron means conceived or born in flame. So it's the same guy.
Yeah. Whoa, that is crazy.
Right. And so essentially, I think I've got old world chronology ties. And if you take that birth date of Christ, it matches exactly, because we know the length of Christ's life. He was there. We know he was a Wednesday crucifixion because there were 3 days of darkness. There's only 1 year where you have a Wednesday crucifixion. It matches exactly with that. So now we have complete correlation of all the calendars and ties to the old world events. So,
and plus all
and
this is all in your book, right? This is all in your book.
Yeah, most of it.
Okay,
So
you guys have to check this out.
the books are free.
Yeah, the books are free online. You can buy paper copies if you want from his website. His name is Jerry D. Grover Jr., and the book is Calendars and Chronology of the Book of Mormon. It's totally awesome. Unfortunately, we got a hard out here. We're going to have to take a brief break, but we will be back in a minute. You guys are listening to Ward Radio. For this and more, please check us out at wardradio.com.
I just feel so good. Oh, I just feel so